Hello. I'm late. Yeah, a couple of minutes. Friday is a bit busy day for me today. Final day of the half term. You know what that means. I feel like that's a very English thing. Maybe European. I don't know if Europeans also have like half terms. Final day of the half term. Big day. Update on Lando's penalty. We'll talk about it. Don't you worry. Hello, Mark. How you doing? No, it's a race weekend. It's the best feeling to have. Alex, completely agree. Completely and utterly agree. I think just knowing that there is a race around the corner once again, considering how good Austin was as well, I'm very, very up for this weekend. Hello, Sally, and Sarah's in the chat as well. How are we all doing? How are we all feeling? Are we ready and raring to go? Josh Swain is there. Let's talk Mexico, shall we? Little preview. And the reason I absolutely love these kind of previews, especially for these races, free practice one is just half an hour away. Free practice one is just half an hour away. We could have a little free practice one watch session too. Have a little look at some rookies running around. Final race in Mexico. We'll get there. We'll get there. Don't you worry. Don't you worry. I just think I've just got an inkling. Just got an inkling. Best YouTuber now live. Thank you, mate. Thank you, mate. Appreciate it. But Sarah wants to get right into it. How is it his last race in Mexico? Tell me the facts. We'll get there. Don't you worry. All right. Let's just make sure that we are cooking and get a couple of bits loaded up. So we come into the Mexican Grand Prix weekend, round 20 of the Formula One season, 24 races this year, of course, 5 more to come. Middle of a triple header. We've got Brazil in a week's time, another sprint. So we will be live a lot that weekend. Then Vegas, Qatar, Abu Dhabi to round out the season. And Mexico's always a bit of a weird one, isn't it? It is always a little bit of a weird one. Back here it said Charles could win the championship. It's turning true. Just need a couple of no points finishes from Max. That is a big ask. Max doesn't really finish outside the top 5 very often, let alone outside of the points. But should we talk about that first and foremost? Let's look at the Drivers' Championship because we all want to delve into it. Max Verstappen still leads. 354 points now on the board after that podium finish last time out in Austin. Elongated his lead to Lando Norris over the course of the weekend. Beat him in the sprint. Beat him in the race. It does feel like Lando Norris's chances. I mean, it was going to be these 3 races, wasn't it? We were going to decide whether or not Lando Norris was actually in a title fight over the course of Texas, Mexico, Brazil. And the fact that Max Verstappen won out in the first of those 3 rounds means that Lando Norris now needs a huge swing in the other direction and needs this Mexican Grand Prix weekend to fall massively in his favor. Like we are talking a Max Verstappen DNF levels of favor, to be honest. And I just can't see it happening. Max Verstappen is so consistent across the season that even as a McLaren fan, even in my most biased of McLaren fan views, I think it's just a little bit too much. I think the damage limitations that Max Verstappen has been able to do has been absolutely astounding. And like, even just looking at his defensive driving in Austin, okay, we'll get to the controversies, the penalties, all that kind of stuff. But for the 10 laps preceding that, Max Verstappen's defensive maneuvers were absolutely stunning. There's a reason that he is a 3-time world champion. Okay, he's been handed a couple of those, you could argue. I would say he fought pretty well in 2022, up until the point where Ferrari kind of threw away their opportunity to battle for the championship. 2023, absolute landslide. But you go back to 2021, Max Verstappen was putting in the performances. That went toe-to-toe with Lewis Hamilton for the entire season. Like, it's very difficult to really say which of the Mercedes or Red Bull car was the better car that season. It was super, super tight between them. So Max Verstappen can do it. It's just that he's been handed a couple of championships by other teams in the last couple of seasons. Like, you can't blame Red Bull for being the fastest car. You can blame Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren, and the rest of the field for not getting anywhere close to them. Like, that shouldn't be on Max Verstappen and Red Bull. That is very much on everybody else. Oh, I've also just realised haven't resized. Poor Valtteri Bottas had fallen off the bottom of the screen. Bless him. There you go. There, for the Valtteri fans out there, he is now on the bottom of it. Cover F1 live better than the race statistics. I will indeed. I will indeed. Don't you worry. That's why I was saying I feel like that would be, if I was going to go full time with this channel, that would be like the next step, right? I would try and do as many sessions as possible, like free practice or not. I try and cover every competitive session at the moment. That's kind of the next step. But yeah, Max Verstappen has just been too good this season still. Too good a driver as Max Verstappen for that championship to be a real fight. Then you're talking about Charles Leclerc being in the battle. I think we can definitely say Charles Leclerc right now is the most informed driver. It was kind of between him and Piastri, wasn't it? They were swapping wins. If you look at Baku and Monza, even before that, they were kind of hovering around the podium positions together. And if you look at Oscar Piastri and Charles Leclerc's recent finishing positions, they've been very, very close to one another up until last weekend in Austin, where Charles Leclerc ran away victorious and Oscar Piastri was most certainly fifth, like by a long way. I do think Oscar will bounce back though, bounce back from a fifth place finish, as if that, isn't a pretty good weekend for somebody who's in their second season and found themselves in a competitive car for the first time. You look at Oscar Piastri, he's ahead of Lewis Hamilton, he's ahead of Carlos Sainz, he's ahead of some big name drivers in the championship. Yes, the McLaren probably has been the best car for more races than most. It's pretty close though, isn't it? You'd say the Red Bull was definitely the fastest for the first 6 races of the season. Then probably the McLaren and the Ferrari. Then after the summer break, after the summer break, I feel like the Ferrari's been right up there with the McLaren for the majority of the races. So it's pretty tight between those two. It's been a real season where it has flip-flopped a lot. We've had Red Bull, we've had McLaren, we've had Ferrari be the fastest car at various points. You could even argue that Mercedes were the fastest car for 3 or 4 races before the summer break. So we have had a lot of different ones. And then you look at, Carlos Sainz behind, Lewis Hamilton in 6th. I think that battle between Hamilton and Russell could get very, very tasty. It was something that I had on my notes to talk about post-Austin, but never got the chance to talk to Dan about it because I didn't want the conversation and the podcast to be, 5 hours long. I could have easily talked to Dan for a very, very long time. Such a pleasure to have on the channel. But I do think that battle between Hamilton and Russell could get very tasty because, Lewis Hamilton wants to leave the Mercedes team on top, right? Even though he's not going to win the championship or anything like that, he wants to leave the team saying, I was the Mercedes man, which he has been, but, you kind of want to leave on a high, don't you? So he probably wants to leave as that number 1 in the Mercedes car. And George Russell wants to kind of prove, well, in a head-to-head battle with Lewis Hamilton, he beat him in their first season together. I feel like George Russell and Lewis Hamilton are going to kind of fight for that number 1 spot towards the end of the season. We could see that get a little bit tasty, especially if they're close to one another out on track. You only have to look at Qatar last year. If they get close to one another, they don't really tend to leave each other that much room. Sergio Perez, 150 points, 200 points adrift of Verstappen. Starting to get a little bit silly now, isn't it? Well, it's been silly for a very long time. The gap between Perez and Verstappen over the course of this season has just been phenomenally large. Nico Hülkenberg has jumped up into 10th place on points. Super weekend from Nico Hülkenberg. Jumps up 5 points now ahead of Lance Stroll as that Aston Martin car is starting to fade a little as well. I think Nico Hülkenberg has kind of proven himself top 10 finish, right? I think that's kind of done now. I wasn't expecting that big a point swing for the Haas team during the Austin weekend, and I can't really see another weekend where I'm like, yeah, Aston Martin are definitely going to nail 6 points with Lance Stroll, or Yuki Tsunoda is definitely going to nail 8 points in an RB. Maybe this Mexican weekend is Yuki Tsunoda's best option, But because it's not a sprint weekend, the likelihood of Yuki Tsunoda picking up 8 points, it seems a little bit far-fetched. And then you look beyond that. Yuki Tsunoda does go well at Abu Dhabi. So maybe Yuki Tsunoda there. Alex Albon 13th. There's been a lot of talk about Alex Albon and Colapinto. I nearly made a video about that this week, but just didn't have time. I've done a lot of little background research on Colapinto versus Albon, and it's looking pretty sketchy for Alex Albon at the moment. He's going through a little bit of a slump, and the problem is you don't want to go through a slump whilst Colapinto is having, absolutely fire races. So a little bit of a worry, and some worry for Williams there, but Alex Albon's still going to keep that seat for next season. Hello, everybody. Oh, a few more people coming into the chat. How we doing? Kevin Magnussen jumped up a couple of positions as well. He's now in 8th place. Obviously, Daniel Ricciardo is going to stay still. Can I see Kevin Magnussen getting 4 more points? Maybe. If the Haas car has the pace it had last weekend, can't see why not. Pierre Gasly was a real disappointment in Austin, though. That strategy call from Alpine, not really sure where they were going with that, what they decided to do. He ended up missing out by a considerable margin with that 5-second penalty as well, didn't he? Ollie Behrman is going to be in a car this weekend, but not in a competitive session. Franco Colapinto could definitely get 7 points, though. Esteban Ocon, probably not. Liam Lawson with his first couple of points on the board. We'll talk about him a little bit later on. Zhou Guanyu, Logan Sargent, Valtteri Bottas, the drivers still without points this year. And that does mean the Constructors' Championship. Oh, I updated the Constructors' Championship. For some reason that looks wrong to me. Oh, no, that's right, because there's Haas above RB. Constructors' Championship looks like this. McLaren, 544 points, 40 points ahead of Red Bull. I think Ferrari are pretty much guaranteed second now in the standings. I just can't see again where Red Bull are going to really turn around the form, because if you look at Charles Leclerc versus Max Verstappen, I think Charles Leclerc is the most informed driver right now on the entire Formula One grid. And then I think if you have Ferrari and Leclerc sort of going for it, then you have Carlos Sainz, who I definitely would back to get more points over Sergio Perez. I can't see how Ferrari don't jump Red Bull, to be honest. I don't think they'll jump McLaren, though, just because Oscar Piastri has been really, really consistent. Lando Norris is a very good driver as well. I think it's that Sergio Perez factor there for me. Mercedes, Aston Martin, kind of in no man's lands between them. Haas, now 2 points ahead of RB. That's the real battle left. I think, Williams and Alpine aren't in much of a scrap now. I know that they got Esteban Ocon to steal the fastest lap point from Colapinto, but I can't see Alpine getting 5 points for the rest of the season, whereas I can see Williams picking up a few more here and there. And then Stake Sauber at the bottom of the pack. We're about 15 minutes out from the beginning of free practice 1. A few things to discuss. I am going to get to Sergio Perez in a moment, but first, let's talk Fernando Alonso. Fernando Alonso is taking part in his 400th Grand Prix this weekend in Mexico, which is a lot. I think we can say that. I really love this logo. I think Aston Martin have done a phenomenal job with this. I know, it doesn't really do much. Although, putting some Toyota stickers on the Haas car made them very, very quick in Austin. Maybe putting some Fernando Alonso stickers up. Maybe we get to finally see Fernando Alonso win for the first time in forever. Doubtful, though, as Fernando Alonso is ill this weekend. He's not taking part in free practice 1. That was sort of said anyway. But he's not feeling 100%. So we might even see somebody come in for Fernando Alonso. And I've said this a couple of times about Fernando Alonso. He doesn't really need to do the rest of the season, does he? He is guaranteed to be 9th in the Drivers' Championship by a considerable margin. And we might see Felipe Drugovich get a run out in the actual Aston Martin race this weekend if Fernando Alonso is still feeling ill. And that means just this logo we get to see again, because it's going to roll over to the Brazilian Grand Prix. And all the celebrations that they've got lined up for Fernando Alonso will have to be put on hold a little bit. I think we will see Fernando Alonso race in the Grand Prix, though, and we'll see the celebrations from Aston Martin. But it is a little bit of a worry for the team, I guess, that if Fernando Alonso isn't feeling better and he does pull himself out of the weekend, we then have to do 400 Grand Prix Spectacular next time around. But yeah, Fernando Alonso, one of the sport's greatest drivers. What more can you say? You know, two-time Formula One world champion. What was it? Like another 5 points in his career, and he'd be a five-time world champion because he finished a point adrift of Kimi Raikkonen in 2007. What was it? 4 points adrift of Sebastian Vettel in 2010, 2009, 2010. And then another kind of like 3 points adrift of Sebastian Vettel in 2012 in a Ferrari car that was nowhere near championship standard. So like he was very, very close on 3 other occasions and could have easily won those championships had things gone slightly differently, especially because a couple of times Ferrari did kind of throw it. Well, there was one time that Ferrari kind of threw it away for him, like when they pitted him and he came out behind Petrov. And yeah, Fernando Alonso could easily be a 5-time world champion had things gone marginally different. Like, again, we're talking 5-6 points over the course of his entire career, just going to him on those weekends rather than other ones. And Fernando Alonso may even hit 500 Grand Prix at this point. Obviously, is signed up for 2025 and 2026. Those seasons are looking like they're going to be 24 races apiece. So he's already at 448 in 2 seasons' time. That's assuming that they don't add any more races to the calendar, which certainly could happen. Like, we've seen the calendar bulk up considerably in the last 4 or 5 years. So Fernando Alonso is well on his way to like 450 Grand Prix starts if things go out the way that they should and he gets all of the Grand Prix that he's contracted to have right now. And then again, rolls around 2026, maybe Aston Martin are there and he wants to stay on another year. As I said, we could see Fernando Alonso pretty close to that 500 mark in 4 seasons' time, because there are so many more races now than there have been in the past. I feel like people are going to keep breaking this record, actually. I feel like because of the just sheer amount of races, you know, it used to be if you got 100 races in your Formula One career, you had to be a really good driver to get like 100 races. But now that is only 4 seasons, like just over, isn't it? So you don't have to be the best driver in the world to get 4 seasons under your belt. So Fernando Alonso getting 4 times that is ridiculous, especially considering he is from the generation slightly before when there was less than 20 Grand Prix a year. And that kind of thing. Fernando Alonso retires at 50. Could easily happen. Easily happen. But the thing that we're going to be looking out for when Free Practice 1 does get underway is some rookie drivers. I absolutely love seeing the rookie Free Practice 1 sessions. They are one of my favorite things that Formula One has introduced, I think. Just seeing the rookies get a run out in a Free Practice 1, seeing them in Formula One cars, and it gives you a proper run out. Like, I remember, and now I'm by no means saying that, you know, I expected Franco Colapinto to be an absolute baller. I remember him coming out in Silverstone, and I rewatched that Free Practice 1. It's one of the only times I'll ever watch like a Free Practice 1 if it's not live. Is I'll go back and watch it if there are some rookies involved. So I feel like just from that perspective, Formula One are gaining eyes, and that's the thing that they want. But I went back and I watched that Free Practice 1 from Silverstone. Franco Colapinto was decent, you know. He was very, very good. And I think that might have just been in the back of James Vowles' head when Logan Sargent had that spin in Zandvoort. He was like, well, we did have Franco Colapinto in the car in Silverstone. He was pretty good. Like, he wasn't too far off Alex Albon. And I think when you consider, because I went back and watched that Silverstone Free Practice session because I was thinking about doing a video on Williams. And, you know, you had Alex Albon, you had Franco Colapinto in a Williams, you had Ollie Behrman in a Haas, you had Isaac Hadjar in a Red Bull, and Jack Doohan in an Alpine. So you had 4 rookies in there. Ollie Behrman, Doohan, guaranteed to have seats next season. Hadjar at the time was winning Formula 2. So, like, Colapinto should have been the one that wasn't really standout. You know what I mean? Like, there were really good Formula 2 drivers and really good rookie drivers in Silverstone. Colapinto was the best one of the 4. Like, Isaac Hadjar was way too, like, conservative when it came to it. You had Ollie Behrman, he knew he kind of had a seat at Haas anyway for the future. So again, just didn't want to destroy the car. Jack Doohan, similar, was kind of just being like, all three of them were just very, very conservative, and all of them just didn't want to break anything. You know what I mean? Whereas Colapinto just went into the Williams car, had a great time, and you could see was just really enjoying his racing, and therefore was like the standout. And he was also the closest of those. So I think Behrman and Hulkenberg was like 4 or 5 temps between them. Hadjar and Max, again, similar. But there was only like a tenth or two between Albon and Colapinto. And like looking back at it now in hindsight, you're like, okay, now I understand why Williams made that decision. Now I understand why James Vowles would have had that in the back of his head. Like, Colapinto was only a couple of temps off in Silverstone. Yes, it's only one free practice session, but bang, get him in the car, see what he can do. And now everybody absolutely loves him. So here's a real great opportunity. Back to this free practice session, went on a real tangent there about Colapinto, but we are going to see Felipe Drugovich in the Aston Martin car. We're going to see Ollie Behrman again in the Ferrari, Pato O'Ward in the McLaren car, hence the pick. Kimi Antonelli is in the Mercedes after the crash in Monza. He is back in. Hopefully we actually get to see him do more than just an out lap and a half a flying lap, or sort of four-fifths of a flying lap. And Robert Schwartzman is in the Sauber. Now, I know that Sauber haven't decided on that final seat yet, but Robert Schwartzman seems like a very odd one, doesn't he? Like, we're going to talk about the Stake Sauber seat a little bit later on, but, you know, Théo Pourchaire's been in and around that seat for a very long time. Again, just seems to be completely shunned. It seems like he has absolutely no chance of getting in the car next year, especially if they're putting Schwartzman in the second seat rather than Pourchaire. But it made me think, like, maybe they could have tried somebody. Like, it just doesn't feel like Schwartzman is going to get that spot. And I know Gabriel Bortoletto is the one that is kind of being talked about for that seat. Would McLaren have let him have a free practice one session at Stake Sauber? Maybe, maybe not. But it would have been interesting if they would have actually been able to get somebody who was maybe more likely to be in that seat. A bit like when Haas had Giovinazzi in the seat at Austin a couple of years ago. Then it went terribly wrong because he smashed the car to pieces. But we at least got to see, like, ooh, Haas are thinking about Antonio Giovinazzi. Whereas I just don't think Sauber are thinking about Schwartzman. Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Schwartzman's been around. I think it's because, you know, he was the Ferrari reserve for so long and was always doing the Ferrari free practice sessions before Behrman. So it did feel like Schwartzman was like on the periphery of a Formula One seat for forever, but he just never got that like breakout opportunity. I guess it's a little bit Nick de Vries, isn't he? No, Nick de Vries was just constantly there for Mercedes, for Aston Martin, for Williams, just doing free practice ones, doing testing sessions, etc., etc. And he just got really lucky that Alex Albon had that one race where he had appendicitis. He got to go into the car, and that got him his opportunity for Formula One. I feel like Schwartzman's kind of been waiting for the same thing. But by the time Carlos Sainz got appendicitis, Ollie Behrman was already there. Whereas if that was a season or 2 seasons ago, that would have been Schwartzman that would have got into that seat, and we'd have been looking at a very different perspective, maybe. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see Drugovich, Behrman, Pato O'Ward, Kimi Antonelli, and Robert Schwartzman all taking part in free practice one. 5 rookies out of the 20 drivers on the grid. And I think most teams have now ticked off their kind of rookie usage for the season. We've got a few more coming up in Abu Dhabi. They love to kind of run them out in Abu Dhabi because they then also get the test after they get to run later on in the weekend. Oh, Yuki Tsunoda is getting a run in a Red Bull, which, you know he's been at RB or AlphaTauri for a very long time. Yuki Tsunoda's never really gotten a full test in a Red Bull, like ever, which seems mad, doesn't it? You know, you've got Daniel Ricciardo's had loads of tests, Liam Lawson's had loads of tests in a Red Bull. Yuki Tsunoda's never had a test in a Red Bull since he's been at RB or AlphaTauri, which just means like he's getting his first run out in a Red Bull car at the end of the season in Abu Dhabi. What does that tell us about Sergio Perez's position? Will it be Yuki Tsunoda that takes his spot? Maybe. But I think that's a very, very interesting choice, isn't it? The fact that Yuki Tsunoda is getting a run out at the end of it. let's get into free practice one then, and let's have a little look at these rookies. After free practice one, I'm going to be talking about the Formula One drivers and the controversial rules that maybe want changing. We're going to be talking about McLaren's appeal. So McLaren is appealing that decision in Austin. And we're also going to be talking about Liam Lawson possibly taking the seat of Sergio Perez, and the fact that actually the driver market isn't quite done yet. That final Formula One seat available at stake Sauber is still there, but I do still think there's a little bit of movement throughout the rest of the field, especially if Red Bull decide to make some decisions up and down the grid. But we'll get into free practice one. We'll watch that first, and then we'll look at those final little news stories for you. Whilst you're here, if I can point you in the direction of a Patreon. I launched a Patreon page because, so after hitting 100,000 subscribers, I decided I wanted to take this channel and what we do to kind of the next level. I want to offer more content. I want to offer better content. And I want to offer things that you guys were interested in. So I ran a poll. So you guys could give me feedback on every part of the channel, from the videos to the shorts to the live streams to things that I put on the community page. You can give me feedback on all the different aspects of things that we kind of produce. And one thing that kind of really stood out was the post-race shows and the fact that they could be turned a little bit and now are going to be used in a slightly different way. So the post-race live streams are now no longer going to be really live streams, but they are going to be up very, very swiftly after the race. So for instance, the Austin one was up at 2 a.m. my time. So I just stayed up for like 4 hours after the race and got that in. So if you could, and you can join for free to begin with, and you can have a little look at the content over on Patreon. The first podcast with Dan No Skill was released on Patreon and also on the YouTube channel. And then also there's a bonus Patreon exclusive interview with Dan afterwards as well. So not only are you going to get the post-race live stream and the post-race podcast, which is now called The Turning Point, plus a podcast every single week, you will also get a mailbag section. So an additional 30-minute podcast every single week. You can get that by either signing up to the Patreon or becoming a member of the channel. And you also get access to a Discord, which is only for members. We kind of have little tete-a-tetes back and forth and occasionally have little chats in there. I'm thinking of doing some sort of town hall kind of things. So you can sign up completely free. You can check out the podcast even without paying anything. And then from there, if you would like to access that extra content, you can access it for a minor additional fee. It is £3 a month, like the same price as a coffee at a fancy coffee place. Probably not anymore, right? Probably more than that for a coffee at this point in this economy that we now live in. But let's see, as we get into free practice one, what's going down. Oop, wrong one. Why is this? Hello? Track limits, interesting. Oh, we haven't got any radio transmissions. Oh, no, they're coming up now. Just needed a moment to reset. Give that a second. That will load. We'll get into free practice one. Already a few drivers out on track. Nobody's setting fast lap times as we speak. Got a few coming around. Free content on Patreon? Exactly. It is indeed Saints work. So you can get the podcast audio completely and utterly for free. So if you just want to sign up to the Patreon for free, you get the bonus mailbag content completely and utterly for free. If you then want to see the video version of the podcast, it is £3 a month. And if I can get to the point where the Patreon, by the end of the season, I kind of want to set a little bit of an objective, like 100 members or so. If I can get to that point, and maybe next season I can sort of start to address and think about moving this channel towards giving you even more content by removing a day that I have to do at my full-time job to circumvent, the money that I'd lose by dropping a day at my full-time job to then spend that day doing more stuff with you guys. I think I need about 100 members to do it, but I'm kind of gauging that on not sure yet, to be honest. Here we go then. Free practice 1 is underway. Mexico, Sergio, Perez, synonymous with one another. Sergio Perez getting underway here in Mexico. Lovely little special helmet as well from Sergio Perez. I'm keeping an eye on Antonelli. Antonelli's just coming around turn 4, turn 5. So the bottom end of the track, bottom right corner, as you look at it on the description. And up towards turn 7. Esteban Ocon setting the standard at a 123 dead. I feel like Alpine might be able to get away with having a pretty decent race this weekend. In Mexico, Gasly seemed to come to life towards the end of the Austin Grand Prix weekend. I feel like this is their last chance to do so, though. I don't know. I just can't see the Alpine car being super swift when it comes to Brazil or Vegas. Vegas super long straights, which don't play into Ocon or Gasly's hands. Oh, and a red flag. Who is it? Who's stopped out on track? Oh, it's debris. I don't know what that's from, but a red flag already called. We only managed to get 7 drivers across the line. Pato O'Ward, the fastest of the rookies, but only Behrman and O'Ward managed to finish their laps, and Behrman looked like more of a warm-up lap as he was 18 seconds off the pace. Oh. There's a little bit of carbon fiber on the track, and it was actually Kimi Antonelli who drove over a little bit of debris. A red flag nonetheless. Well, that has put a little bit of a kibosh on the start of this free practice 1 session, hasn't it? I'm going to quickly change the title. What in the Acorn Cop was the FIA doing with a red flag instantly? Some debris. Yeah, it did seem a little bit extreme, I'm going to say. I feel like they didn't really need a full red flag at that point. But, you know, is what it is. Kimi Antonelli, though, just need to check the underside of that Mercedes car, I'd imagine, after running over that debris. Just check the kind of front end of the floor. Already see the torches coming out for the Mercedes team. Underneath the car, just double checking everything is okay. Little thumbs up there. Seems to be all right from just looking at it. Hello, Lumi, mate. Welcome to the chat. Robert Schwartzman, of course, in the Stakes Sauber garage. Must be so much effort for the team to kind of change all of the decals inside of the garage just for the one-off free practice 1 session. I suppose they don't change the numbers at the back of the garage. Like, you can see the 24 of Zhou Guanyu right at the back. But above Schwartzman, they've got the 97 and Schwartzman in the lime green. They got Robert across the headrest. I suppose the headrest is specific to him, so that does make sense. Felipe Drugovich. Also looking at the underside of Felipe Drugovich's car in the Aston Martin. So maybe there was a few drivers that ran over that piece of debris, which is why they decided to red flag it. Does seem a little bit extreme. Feels like you could have maybe double yellowed it. Had somebody run out there just at the right time. Did Antonelli take a spin? No. Antonelli ran over a little bit of debris. Antonelli to try doing a lap without breaking the car. He's got to do it next year. He's got 24 races to complete next season. I think we're going to see Antonelli again in Abu Dhabi, maybe in a free practice one. Definitely in the postseason test. Because I don't think George Russell will stick around for that, to be honest. But I think Kimi Antonelli will definitely want that runtime. But it's so much pressure on him, isn't it? To jump straight into a top 4 team, you know, what realistically used to be the top 3. Only McLaren have kind of jumped into that threshold of recent years. So jumping straight into one of the big boys is pressure, you know? Even Max Verstappen had a year at the second team, kind of bedded into Formula 1 a little bit. Became controversial, did Max Verstappen, no doubt. Had a few crashes, a few spins. But at least he was able to do that in the second team, you know what I mean? Whereas Kimi Antonelli is going to be right under the microscope as soon as he gets into Formula 1. Big amounts of pressure. Still a red flag, though, and no sign as to when this red flag is going to come to a close. Thoughts on Perez to Sauber? Not for me, but they're keeping that seat open for something. They're keeping that seat open, I think, for Bortoleto, which we will talk about. We're going to talk post. So before the, if you want to kind of scroll back while there's a red flag happening, for the half an hour or so before the Grand Prix, before free practice 1, we talked about the Drivers' Championship, the Constructors' Championship, Fernando Alonso's 400th race, and the rookies that are coming in to this weekend's free practice 1 session as a little bit of an intro to it. And then after this, we're going to talk that McLaren controversy in Austin, whether or not it should have been a penalty, and the fact that McLaren are now appealing it. We might even get to see what the appeal comes to in this stream. We're also going to then look at Liam Lawson and Sergio Perez and that final seat at stake Sauber. I'd argue he's already got a bunch of microscopes on him. I mean, yes. But you know what I mean. You know what I mean. It's got a lot of pressure. We are back underway, though. Esteban Ocon, the first man out on track. Liam Lawson in his new RB car. First couple of points on the board. 1 race down out of 6. And if he can just get a couple of points per race, he will match Daniel Ricciardo for the season. So it's a big ask from Liam Lawson to finish 9th in 6 Grand Prix in a row. But he's done it once. Can he do it 5 more times? That would be a real nail in the coffin, wouldn't it, for Daniel Ricciardo? I know that Daniel Ricciardo very unlikely to come back into Formula 1 anyway, but that would just be a huge, huge move for Liam Lawson if he was able to then match Daniel Ricciardo in terms of points scored for the season when Ricciardo had 18 races and Lawson only had 6. Like, that would be huge. What do the diagonal lines mean? That means they are a slightly scrubbed set of tyres. So for the teams that were running out beforehand, they're not going to put a brand new set of tyres on, or very unlikely to put a brand new set of tyres on. So because they've come back into the pits, those tyres technically are scrubbed sets or used sets of tyres. So is this live? It is. And it's not a race, it's free practice 1. It does say practice 1. If you look where it says Mexico City GP ... practice 1. And the fact that it's a 60-minute timer running down. But we did lose about 10 minutes of it to a red flag. We are going to finally see, though, some flying laps again. Esteban Ocon on a flying lap. Carlos Sainz has just started his Piastri just coming across the start-finish line. I'm keeping my eye on Pato O'Ward, just running around behind Kevin Magnussen's Haas at the moment through turn 7. We've also got Felipe Drugovich just starting his first flying lap, coming across the start-finish line. Antonelli, of course, coming across the line for Mercedes now. So we'll get to see what kind of pace these drivers really have in this free practice one. Of course, we don't know what fuel loads they're running. Everybody is on the hard compound tyre that is out on track, so nobody decided to go for, like qualifying level soft compound tyres. Mercedes not going for that move this time around with Kimi Antonelli to try and put him at the top of the timing sheets. But we have got Kimi Antonelli on some hard compound tyres, hopefully completing a full lap. We're yet to see him do a full flying lap at this point, because the debris caused a red flag and we got to stop 4 or 5 minutes into this free practice session. George Russell, though, has gone quickest of anybody so far. George Russell, 120.7. Sergio Perez, 120.7 as well. 7 hundredths of a second between them. Oscar Piastri, 121.4. And we're looking for those young drivers coming across the line. Looks like Felipe Drugovich has backed out of this lap, because he was ahead of Kimi Antonelli, but Antonelli now coming around the final couple of corners. Through the stadium section he comes. Drugovich may be going for a flying lap again. Here comes Antonelli. He finally gets a lap in. It's a 123.1 from the Italian driver in the Mercedes car. But lovely to see him finally get one. Finally get a flying lap in that felt proper. You know what I mean? Bottas's dominance may bore fans. Interesting to see how close Schwartzman does get. Although Schwartzman still in the pit lane. And they did this last year, didn't they? They put Teo Pourchaire in for a free practice 1 session here in Mexico last year. Did Stake Sauber. And he didn't actually get any running. So it's just like, come on. Let's actually see Schwartzman on the track this year, please. Otherwise, it's just a repeat of last year where we saw Teo Pourchaire for about 30 seconds in the car. Pato O'Ward, indeed. Feel like Pato is underrated. I feel like it's just, he suits IndyCar, doesn't he? And he kind of made his name a little bit in IndyCar. And there's not many drivers that make that switch across, The last driver to make the switch, Montoya, I want to say. Montoya, the last driver to go from IndyCar to Formula 1. I know that we send drivers the other way more often than not. Grosjean went, Ericsson went. Whereas there's not many drivers that drive in IndyCar and make their way into Formula 1. It's not really a path traveled very often in recent seasons. Yeah, I mean, someone can double check that, but I do think it's Montoya who was the last driver to go from IndyCar into Formula 1. Go Perez. Perez having a good one. 120.7 from Sergio Perez on his first run. 120.9 from Max Verstappen. So quicker than his teammate. Lewis Hamilton just beside Toto Wolff. Having a little look. That's Kimi Antonelli, the man who is taking his place. Mansell went to... Oh, no. I'm thinking not Formula 1 drivers that went to Indy. Indy drivers that came to Formula 1. There's lots of drivers that have gone from Formula 1 to Indy in recent years. Like Marcus Ericsson went, Romain Grosjean went. Are there more recent ones than that I'm possibly missing? Antonio Giovinazzi? No, Giovinazzi went Formula E, didn't he? Or did Giovinazzi get a run out in IndyCar as well? Definitely went to Formula E. You know what I mean? There's a few drivers that have gone from Formula 1 to IndyCar. IndyCar to F1, not so much. Oh, Valtteri Bottas trying to break the Williams run. And Colapinto and Albon deciding not to let Valtteri Bottas past. Also, the lovely yellow livery from the Williams team this weekend has come because Colapinto has brought in even more money. It feels like Colapinto has really done, well, he's done incredibly well out on track anyway, but also done wonders for the Williams team off track as well, especially for these next couple of Grand Prix where Williams are going to be running this special livery with the additional couple of sponsors that Colapinto has brought in for the team. Gasly on the radio. And something in the car not quite right for Gasly. See if you can spot anything on the data. Possibly an issue inside Gasly's car. I can smell something burning. Giovinazzi went to WEC. Yes, that is very true. Oh yeah, he won Le Mans with Ferrari. What am I speaking? Of course. Montoya. Yeah, I think it is Montoya. Rossi? Was he? Maybe. Doesn't fit Williams at all. I quite like it, but then maybe I just like it because it is bringing a huge amount of attention to Williams and a huge amount of money to Williams as well. Like, they really need it. Even if you don't like the livery, the fact that it's bringing a huge amount that they can now invest is well worth it for the team. Having a South American in your team increases your sponsorships 50%. Oh, yeah, it's huge. It's because there's so little... Like, Formula One is still massive in South America because of the history, right? The first few Formula One champions were Argentinian, or there was Argentinians in there. Brazilians absolutely dominated for a little while. There were so many Brazilians up and down the Formula One grid for so long. It's huge, you know. Motorsport in South America is massive. Sergio Perez has kind of been the closest to that in recent years, and you see how much money he brings. Like, he has huge sponsorship deals with so many different companies in and around the Americas to Sergio Perez. So the fact that Colapinto is in there, massive amount of sponsorship that comes with that. And especially whilst he's been doing well, more and more sponsors have jumped on board, you know? The better he does, the more and more sponsors are going to come his way. And it's just going to be great for Williams. Like, even if he does go into a reserve role with them next season, I feel like the fact that he's still going to be in and around the team, they can chuck him some free practice 1 sessions here and there, especially if they throw him into free practice 1 sessions like this weekend in Mexico, or maybe they chuck him into a free practice 1 session in Brazil. That's going to be big. It's going to be big for the Argentinian, South American fan base, and it's going to be big for Williams. I say as Alex Albon goes to the top of the timing sheets until George Russell then removes him from that swiftly. Alex Albon now second on the timing sheets. Venezuela GOAT Pastor Maldonado, the only Venezuelan driver to pick up a victory in Formula One. I think the only Venezuelan driver in Formula One, full stop, I want to say. Can't think of another one off the top of my head, but I think that's because there haven't been many. And I'll be honest, my Formula One knowledge does start to disintegrate kind of 2009 backwards. So, who's driving in practice? We've got 5 rookies to keep a touch on. Pato O'Ward is in Lando Norris's car. I can see Lando Norris in the garage there. We've got Antonelli replacing Lewis Hamilton. Ollie Behrman in for Charles Leclerc. Felipe Drugovich for Fernando Alonso. And Schwartzman in the car as well. And we're finally going to see Schwartzman do a flying lap. We're only 22 minutes in. And the rookie, Robert Schwartzman, is now going into the car. He was replacing Zhou Guanyu for this free practice 1 session. Although we have seen the Russian a lot in Formula One, haven't we, throughout the years. What caused the red flag? There was a tiny little piece of debris on the back straight. I think it was around about sort of turn 4 area. Oh no, maybe not. Maybe it was just past turn 11. I couldn't really see where it was. What do I do outside YouTube? I teach. I'm a teacher. Oh, there's a big spin, and it is a Williams in the barrier, and it might be Colapinto. No, it's Alex Albon. Woo. Don't worry, Colapinto fans. It is Alex Albon and a second red flag, and we're still not going to see Schwartzman do a lap. Oh my, they can't do this. Sauber cannot get away with having 2 years in a row at the Mexican Grand Prix, having Teo Porcher in a free practice one, and he didn't get a fast lap, and then putting Schwartzman in the next year around for a free practice one in Mexico as well, and also not getting a fast lap in. This is madness. But Alex Albon has spun out. Ollie Behrman also... Is Ollie Behrman moving? He's stopped on the drive. Oh, Ollie Behrman's in the wall as well. Ollie Behrman has come to a stop in the Ferrari. So both Albon and Behrman are going to be out of this first free practice session. Not sure. Is Ollie Behrman actually in the wall there, or has he just come to a stop in the Ferrari car? It was very difficult to tell. Thank you, Mythos, for subscribing to the channel. Massively appreciate that, mate. Alex Albon has binned it. But Ollie Behrman is very, very close. So I wonder, was there some kind of contact between the two, or maybe just some dirty air that pushed Alex Albon to lose control? He's just gone into the wall at turn 10, and Ollie Behrman has come to a complete stop. Not in the barriers, just on the side of the track, just at turn 11. So Ollie Behrman's just come to a stop in his Ferrari car. The medical car there for Alex Albon, although he's getting in himself, so he is all okay. I think just needs a lift back to the pits. And Ollie Behrman also wandering about on the track. I think now waiting for a car to pick him up too. And then the Aston Martin actually just drives past. I suppose the Aston Martin has to take Alex Albon as quickly as possible, and therefore not allowed to stop Ollie. Oh! And it was Alex Albon actually did clip Ollie Behrman's car. And Alex Albon blaming Ollie Behrman. Let's have a little look. No. Albon does lose it through turn 9. And And Behrman looks like he's trying to move out of the way of Alex Albon. Kind of moves all the way to the right-hand side of the track. And Alex Albon, because he loses it a little bit through turn 9, then comes to touch Ollie Behrman. Let's look at it from the onboard of the Ferrari. He's come off the curb a little bit as Alex Albon, and does look like Albon is out of control a little bit, but then it's also as Albon seen the fact that Behrman is there and just sort of tried to turn away from Ollie Behrman. But they have clipped one another. And they have contact indeed. Alex Albon hitting into the left-hand side of Ollie Behrman's Ferrari. So his Ferrari comes to a stop. Alex Albon's Williams then loses control and spins into the barriers. A big collision there for Alex Albon and the Williams team to put back together. Should be okay for Ferrari. Maybe a little bit of floor damage. Charles Leclerc will not be too happy about on that brand new floor that the Ferrari got around about the Monza Grand Prix weekend. Doesn't look like there's too much damage to the Ferrari. Just looking at it, obviously a lot more damage to the Williams car, because the Williams car ended up in the barriers, and they're going to have to replace the Tech Pro there as well. So a big stop for this red flag, unfortunately. Whilst we're here, maybe hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new, maybe become a member, or you don't like memberships on YouTube, maybe sign up to the Patreon. You can sign up completely and utterly for free. Just hit the link in the description. Sign up to the Patreon for free. You get additional content over on the Patreon for free. And then if you want to see that content, so you get the audio version of the podcast completely and utterly for free. If you want to see the video version of the podcast, you just have to pay the tiniest £3 a month. It's the same as buying me a lovely little coffee maybe, or, you know, if we were in a bar together and you bought me a drink because you want to take me home, maybe, you know, you'd spend upwards of £3 on me. Whose fault was the crash? Difficult to say, really. I think Alex Albon is a little bit out of shape coming out of turn 9. He kind of bounces off the curb of turn 9 a little bit, and it looks like the rear end of the Williams car has already stepped out. But then it's difficult to judge because maybe it looks like it stepped out because he sees Ollie Behrman there and he almost tries to like snap around Ollie Behrman, but then actually just hits into it. Oh, are you talking about? Yeah, he does. Robert Schwartzman drives under the Israeli flag, indeed. Yeah, because he's obviously not allowed to run under the Russian flag at the moment. Hence why Nikita Mazepin lost his seat. Can you imagine if Nikita Mazepin still had his seat right now? Oh, goodness gracious me. I would not be happy about that at all. He was just an absolute drain on my Formula One life. He was entertaining, though, don't get me wrong, but just for all the wrong reasons. It's difficult, isn't it, So Mint Cooper? It's like looking at Ollie Behrman's onboard, it just feels like Albon has lost control of the car beforehand. But then because Behrman has moved all the way over to the right-hand side of the track, so that area, so you come through turn 9, and what you really want to do is take the real inside line of turn 9, but then switch back across as quickly as possible so that you can, again, have quite a wide line through turn 10, because you have to do turn 10, turn 11 as almost like a long chicane or like little windy S part. So you kind of cut turn 9 and then you switch back across to the outside of the track again very, very quickly. So it looks like Albon is trying to do that. But he's kind of gone over turn 9 on the bumps. I don't think it then helps that he's in the dirty air of Ollie Behrman. So also then loses a little bit more downforce because of that in the Williams car. Like, we know how sensitive the Williams car is to any change in downforce, especially if it's like windy in certain areas of the track. And I think it's just a tricky one. Do I think Williams will be able to fix the car before qualifying? Yes. Yeah. It's whether or not they'll be able to fix the car before free practice 2, which is the real question. There is Schwartzman watching the onboard with him. Still no fast lap from Schwartzman. Still no fast lap from Drugovich. We are over halfway through this first free practice 1 session. I don't know how they keep getting away with this. Mazepin was just a bit of the Haas cake. You didn't like that much. Did anyone like Nikita Mazepin? Can you actually find anyone who was unironically a fan of Nikita Mazepin? Like, if you can find anybody who bought Nikita Mazepin merch unironically, like because they were an actual fan, like they bought Haas merch with Mazepin's number or Mazepin's name, unironically, I will be incredibly impressed. I will be stunned into silence. Albon using the rookie FP1 practice as a scapegoat for his crash. Oh, James Vance now being a little look. Yeah, James Val's frustrated and doesn't really say much more than that, to be honest. Nikita's dad, also his mum. Okay, not related to Nikita, like somebody completely unrelated to Mazepin who bought a piece of merchandise. I bought this RB jumper, one, because it was part of the 100,000 subscriber special, but secondly, because, you know, they're kind of my second team. In the same way that Red Bull have a second team, I also have them as my second team, mainly because of Pierre Gasly. And just the fact there was a point in my life where I really enjoyed Toro Rosso, like the idea of having a second team. I think now I've kind of grown up a little bit more. I don't like the fact that Red Bull are the only team on the Formula One grid that have 2 full teams for their drivers. I think that is a little bit sort of sketchy at times, especially when you talk about, Daniel Ricciardo stealing fastest lap from Lando Norris and things like that they can manipulate and can do. I know it's only 1 point, and people are going to be like, well, you're only saying that because you're a McLaren fan. But I do kind of think that is a little bit sketchy. And that kind of thing. So, yeah. Your alkaline point. All right. I'm being proved wrong. But, all right. Someone unrelated to just a fan of Formula One. Doesn't work in Formula One. Doesn't work as a Formula One sponsor. Just a proper supporter. Driver supporter rather than a team. Oh, yeah. There lots of people are. Lots of people are. Like, you're going to see a lot of Mercedes merch become Ferrari merch when it comes to, like, Silverstone next year, for instance. A lot of people are Lewis Hamilton fans, not Mercedes fans. And you have that. I think, for me, I don't know. I've always just been McLaren because it was, like, the first team. And I think because I was a football fan before I was a Formula One fan, it's kind of the done thing in football, isn't it? You follow the team, not a player. Whereas it does feel like more and more now, people follow a driver, follow a player in various sports rather than actually following a team or an established sort of part of the grid, which is fair enough. I could have easily become a Carlos Sainz fan. Absolutely loved Carlos Sainz when he was in a McLaren car. Really liked seeing Carlos Sainz do well in a Ferrari. But I don't know. I wouldn't call myself a Ferrari fan because of that. All the teams are in the UK. True. Apart from Ferrari. Ferrari are based in Italy. Sauber, also not based in the UK. But that, I suppose, is the aerodynamics division. That's going to be now based sort of here, there, and everywhere, though, isn't it? Everyone else based pretty much in the UK, predominantly. What's happened? Another red flag, unfortunately. Alex Albon just gets... I think he does... I think Albon does panic a little bit. Not panic, maybe panic's the wrong word. I think Albon does realise that Behrman is kind of there and just loses it. And the fact that he loses it and then also tries to get out of the throttle, yeah, it's a pretty big shunt, actually. Whole rear right tyre of Alex Albon's car comes dislodged. That then ricochets into the rear wing of the car. And then it's the front of the car that goes into the barrier. So that's also then the front left-hand side of the car. So the rear right of the car and the front left of the car completely demolished on the Williams, which means a big job for the Williams team before free practice 2 gets underway. We are back under green flag conditions, though. Thank goodness. 24 minutes on the clock here in free practice 1. Alex Albon, wrong place, wrong time. Yeah, I think it goes down as like a free practice incident. I guess it's not a racing incident, but you know what I mean. I think it's just one of those, like, neither driver does anything particularly wrong. Alex Albon just loses it a little bit. Behrman doesn't expect Alex Albon to bump over the curbs in that way. Ooh. McLaren changing the floor of their car. The Pato Awards car? I think so. Pato Awards car getting a floor change for the rest of free practice 1. So the McLaren team using this red flag to try and change the floor around. Haven't quite finished it yet, but they're just removing that first floor from the underside of the car and changing it around for a second one. McLaren was founded by a New Zealander? Correct. So excited today. I think I'm in love. Wow. Mango i7. Having a good day. Behrman is out as well. Yeah, unfortunately. Behrman and Albon will not be seen again in this first free practice session. Verstappen and Perez coming out side by side. Come on. Let's see if we can get a Drugovich or Schwartzman lap. Drugovich and Schwartzman have done 5 laps and 6 laps apiece. None of them have been fast laps. How are we at this point? They've all been either in laps or out laps. Oh, Carlos Sainz versus Max Verstappen down to turn 12. And Carlos Sainz using DRS to try and stay in front of Max Verstappen. Getting a little bit dicey between the two of them. Carlos Sainz wanting to stay in front and does indeed in the Ferrari car. Schwartzman is out. Antonelli is also out. Got Drugovich just coming around turn 3. So a few of the rookies back out on track. Still no award because they are changing around the floor of his McLaren car. And no more Bearman, I'm afraid, for the rest of this session. Hasn't really been a standout rookie as of yet, I wouldn't say. None of them have been scintillating at any point, but we also haven't seen very many laps in this first free practice session, so not really too much to write home about. Although lots of cars now coming out on the soft compound tyre, so that'll be a lot more fun. We'll get to see some proper fast laps from these cars. Antonelli still on the hard compound tyre. In fact, yeah, Drugovich and Schwartzman on the hard compound tyre still too. So some fast laps coming, but fast laps coming from drivers with a bit more experience. For instance, Pierre Gasly jumps to 4th in the timing sheets on his soft compound tyre set. Kevin Magnussen the same, up into 3rd. Carlos Sainz has gone quickest of anybody through the middle sector. Was quicker than Max Verstappen. George Russell, though, has just gone quickest of anyone through the 1st sector. Yuki Tsunoda goes to the top of the timing sheets with a 119.3 from the Japanese driver. In a weekend that should suit that RB car. They've been pretty quick in Mexico. Think back to Yuki Tsunoda doing very well here last year until he collided with Oscar Piastri. And it was also probably the standout race for Daniel Ricciardo last season once he'd come back from his injury. Did really well here in Mexico. So the RB car does like the Mexican Grand Prix. George Russell there goes for a 117.9, the first driver to break into the 117s for the weekend. Carlos Sainz, a 118.5 in the Ferrari 5 tenths off. Another 8 tenths to Max Verstappen in 3rd. Yuki Tsunoda's now dropped all the way down to 6th. Colapinto goes wide at turn 12 and has ruined his lap a little bit. Goodness me. Shame that true teams like Lotus aren't there. Yeah, well, there's a lot of teams that have kind of come and gone. They might come back. I feel like Lotus probably won't come back, but especially because they've moved more into the electric car market. I could see Lotus buying a Formula E team. I feel like that could happen. But yeah, Colapinto almost puts the second Williams in the wall. That would have been an absolute disaster if both of the Williams cars would have ended up in the barriers. But Colapinto catches it around turn 12, does well enough. George Russell still the fastest man out on track. Colapinto going wide, only 13th fastest still, 2 seconds adrift. Still behind Alex Albon, who obviously is not going to take part anymore. It's a shame that we're seeing sort of Antonelli, Lawson, Schwartzman, Award still on the hard compound tyre. Well, I haven't actually seen Award back on track. Drugovich on the hard compound tyre. Would have been nice to see one of those guys get a little bit of a sprint towards the end. Could have been a little bit of fun. Now looking at Max Verstappen just starting another flying lap. A few of the cars coming into the pits after having done a lap on those soft compound tyres to switch around and maybe go for a medium tyre run. Free practice 1, always a good opportunity to try out all the different tyre compounds if you need to. Just to see. Back markers Aston Martin. I mean, they are missing quite a key component of what's made them fast this year. Fernando Alonso is not in either of the cars. So this is what Aston Martin looked like without Fernando Alonso, I'm afraid. Lance Stroll, 14th fastest. Felipe Drugovich comes across the line and puts himself 18th fastest of anybody. Valtteri Bottas coming around 10th. Sonoda, Stroll, Drugovich, Sainz, Lawson, Colapinto all going for more flying laps. Schwartzman has finally got a lap time on the board, a 1:22 dead. Not quick by any means, but we finally have seen that second stakes Sauber car finish a free practice 1 lap. Didn't manage to do any last year with Teo Porcher. Evan Magnussen coming across the start-finish line. I think everybody's kind of had their run now. It's going to be 15 minutes of just seeing where the pace is on some slightly different tyres and slightly different bits and pieces. Have a little look. Gasly coming across the line. Yeah, Russell's coming for some tyres. Maybe we'll see a few more of the rookie drivers going to the soft compound tyre towards the end. That'd be quite nice. Albon and Behrman out of this one. I'll kind of keep you updated. Be interesting to see what Albon or Behrman say about the incident, but I don't know if either of them would have made their way back to the pit lane yet. And if they had, probably not even going into seeing whether or not they're going to come into the media pen. And now they decide to put on adverts. Great. Well, that's annoying. Just having a look. Hulkenberg going for a longer run on the soft compound tyre is quite interesting. You wear a scrub set of softs when you put them on. Going again. Oh, Flavio Briatore. The Alpine garage. The man who's come in and ripped up the rulebook. Jack Doohan in the Alpine garage as well. Interesting that we didn't see Jack Doohan in the car, to be honest. Obviously, Alpine have done both of their rookie runs already for the season, but with the fact that he's coming into the car next year, would have expected to see him maybe take the place of Esteban Ocon a little bit more often. Skip Piastri, not very happy inside the McLaren car at all, by the sounds of it, over the radio. I think, yeah, rather than going for a long run, I think Oscar Piastri would rather come back into the pits and see the car changed around a little bit to try and make it better, rather than getting data on a poor setup like this one that he's got right now. Carlos Sainz just coming around again. Second fastest man out on track in pre-practice 1. Esteban Ocon has had a go on some soft compound tyres. Ocon goes 7th fastest. Not bad at all from Esteban Ocon. The Toyota racing logo on the Haas already working wonders. Does seem to be absolutely flying, doesn't it? I know it's got nothing to do with Toyota. Toyota haven't actually started their official... Well, they've started their official partnership with Haas, but they haven't started doing any work on the car with the Haas team yet. But it does feel like stickers just make you go quicker sometimes. Those stickers have come on and absolutely flown. Sauber will surely be closer next season. Audi won't want to start last in 26. I don't know. There's so much that they need to improve. Like, their car is the worst by a long way in almost every single way. That it's just like, there's almost too much for them to be able to actually get themselves back into contention. I know what you mean, though. But also, Audi don't 100% care until their engine is inside the car. Like Audi aren't really judged until it's their engine inside the Formula One car and it's kind of their stickers on the car. So yeah, they won't want to go into the season miles off the pace. But also at the same time, I can't imagine them spending, hundreds of millions of dollars just to try and scratch back a tiniest little bit. Pato O'Ward on a set of soft compound tyres. Here we go. This is what we came for, ladies and gentlemen. Antonelli's on a set of soft compound tyres as well. Lawson, I know, isn't technically a rookie. He's got 6 Grand Prix in Formula 1, but still would be nice to see Lawson on a fresh set of soft compound tyres. Have a little go in the RB car after a couple of points scored last weekend. Let's see what they got in the tank then. Colapinto managed to go 10th fastest on his soft compound tyre run. Obviously, can kind of be bundled in with the rookies. I know that he's had a few races now for the Williams team, but still very young in terms. Ooh, Pato O'Ward. 2 tenths off George Russell through the first sector, a 27.9 from the Mexican driver. Come on, Pato. Let's get it up there. What did Oscar Piastri do? Oscar Piastri did a 118.9. Hard compound tyres, though. So Piastri 9 tenths off of it. Pato O'Ward just coming towards the end of this middle sector. And he's a second adrift of George Russell's time, unfortunately, through the middle sector is Pato O'Ward, a 30.7 from him. So it's not looking like it's going to be, top of the tree times from Pato O'Ward, but it's definitely going to be an improvement on the 4.1 seconds that he is adrift of George Russell at the moment. Comes across the line. It's 11th fastest for Pato O'Ward on the soft compound tyre. Antonelli and Lawson now also running around. Lawson going to improve. Goes just quicker than Pato O'Ward. He jumps up into 11th spot from there. 19.285 from Lawson, so just 100th in it. Antonelli comes across the line. He also goes 11th fastest. Is a little bit of a pattern there. O'Ward, Lawson, Antonelli all go 11th fastest to put Antonelli at the top of that sheet. 1.2 seconds off the pace and 85 thousandths of a second quicker than Liam Lawson in the V-Carb. Not too shabby, Alonso. Kimi Antonelli, just a 10th off Colapinto. Of course, Colapinto been in the Williams car for a few weekends now. But Antonelli did indeed manage to do a flying lap on soft compound tyres. Did not put it into the wall. Who do I think was at fault for the Albon crash? I do think Albon is slightly more to blame there, just because Albon is all out of shape. Albon comes out of turn 9, all out of shape. Like, the rear end of the car is stepping out, doesn't quite feel like he's fully under control. Behrman has peeled off to the right-hand side of the track, like, pretty considerably, and then just kind of ends up spinning it. Like, just ends up hitting into Behrman's front left tyre and putting it in the wall. O'Ward behind Lawson in a much better car. True. Lawson's had a weekend in the car, though, and had more free practice sessions, but I know what you mean. O'Ward is kind of jumping in as a one-off, isn't he? It's because Pato O'Ward is Mexican, and also part of the McLaren Arrows team. So it's just great PR almost for the team to kind of chuck him in. It is nice to see him. It's a shame it's not like Alex Palou again. I feel like Alex Palou, when he drove in the US, was really, really fun to watch. Maybe we'll see Bortoleto at Brazil. That'd be interesting. I don't know if McLaren have actually said who's going to be in the other free practice session. They haven't had another driver in a free practice session already, have they? Checks his notes. I don't think so. So I think McLaren have got to run another rookie in a free practice somewhere. So I know what you mean there. A little bit frustrating maybe from Pato O'Ward that he's not closer towards the top end. But even Oscar Piastri is only, a second, or he's only, what, 3/10 quicker? Yeah, Piastri's only 3/10 quicker at the minute. Not a ridiculous gap. Verstappen on the radio having engine issues. Is this going to be the Verstappen DNF weekend? He's got no power. Or maybe it's a Verstappen penalty weekend. They do have to end up putting another power unit in the car. Doesn't sound healthy. Does not sound healthy on board with Max Verstappen right now. He's just coming around turn 6. And he's not even using full throttle. He's just kind of drifting the car around half throttle for Max Verstappen, just trying to nurse the car home, unfortunately. Alex Palou has become a really great driver in Indy. Someone from Indy deserves a chance. It's him. I think he was very close, wasn't he? But he's kind of given up on that dream. I remember seeing an interview with him after winning the IndyCar Championship where he was kind of like, I tried, I made that connection with McLaren. I thought about it. I discussed it with them, but it never kind of came to fruition in the way that he wanted to. So, yeah, he kind of said he didn't want to move to F1 in the end. Yeah, as Agura has just said, he kind of, I don't know if he necessarily turned down F1. Maybe some of the seat, if he was offered a seat somewhere, it probably wouldn't have been the caliber of seat that he'd have wanted, maybe. I don't know. He didn't go into a load of detail. He just kind of, because, when you interview him about winning the IndyCar Championship, you want to talk more about IndyCar, right? And he wants to talk more about the fact that he's a world champion, as opposed to, how come you weren't in Formula One? Yeah, I agree. Alex Palou would have definitely been my pick of the drivers that have been in free practice sessions recently that I'd have loved to have seen, just given a season in a car somewhere to see what he could do. Also, the way that he drives in IndyCar is very Formula One reminiscent. I know that his come up was through sort of European formulas, wasn't it? He was in European Formula 3 and Formula 4. So I know he has that kind of very European way of driving, I guess. And the fact that he's Spanish kind of plays into that. But I do feel like his driving style, of all of the IndyCar drivers that are there, could definitely happen. Felipe Drugovich. Not ideal, says Felipe Drugovich, so not very happy with his lap. And yeah, 119.8. I don't know whether or not there was some traffic or what happened there. What happened to Herta? Also, just when the opportunity arose, he didn't have the super license points to be able to get a super license, did he? That's what ended up being Nick De Vries's seat, because the RB team, or at the time AlphaTauri, were really pushing to get Herta into the car. They even tried to apply for his super license, despite the fact that he didn't quite have enough points to get a super license. They were going to try and do some practice sessions and bits and pieces with him so that they could get that super license for him, but the FIA said no, basically. So Herta never got that opportunity at RB and never really sort of seemed to get that opportunity again. It went to Nick De Vries, then it went to Daniel Ricciardo, then because Liam Lawson did so well, it's gone to Liam Lawson. So Herta never really got another opportunity at going into that seat. When would you have put him in? If they'd have taken Daniel Ricciardo out and put Colton Herta into the seat for the end of the season and not Liam Lawson, I think there'd have been riots. So many people wanted Liam Lawson in that seat after what he did during the time that he substituted in for Daniel Ricciardo. So yeah, I think Herta just kind of ended up. Valtteri Bottas, 9/10 of a second quicker than Schwartzman, is an interesting statistic. in one way or another. But 2.5 minutes left to run in this one. Russell, Sainz, Tsunoda are top three at the moment. The best rookie runner. Do we count Liam Lawson? Do we count Colapinto? If not, Antonelli, fastest of them out on track. Award, second fastest of the 5 rookies that are there. Dragovic, Schwartzman, and Behrman at the bottom of the barrel, unfortunately, for those 3 rookies in this one. Behrman particularly will be frustrated, obviously, taken out of this Grand Prix, I think you can, or this free practice 1 session, I think you could argue. Not really his fault, I would say. That collision with Alex Albon does mean that he is now fallen down to 20th place and only got half a session, if that, with the additional red flag that we had towards the beginning. Carlos Sainz on a set of hard tyres. Coming around sector 1. I don't think anybody is on a fresh set of softs, are they? I think that is done and dusted in terms of the quick lap times. Verstappen's car is smoking. I mean, Verstappen's car is in the pits. Is it smoking in the pits? That would be bad. Because Verstappen's car was not sounding very healthy at all when it was coming around for that lap. Verstappen on the radio complaining about the engine. Then we cut to the onboards with him, and he was using half throttle and just kind of trying to nurse that car back into the pit lane. It's never good when you're not driving a Formula 1 car fast, is what I would say. Here comes Yuki Tsunoda again. He's on a set of hard compound tyres, though, so he's not going to improve on his 118.6. George Russell, the only man to delve into the 117. So 117.9 from George Russell. Just tuned in, didn't expect to see so many rookies. Yeah, loads of rookies in this session. Well, I mean, if you count like Lawson and Colapinto in there as well, 7 rookies, or 7 drivers that didn't start the season, I guess, in a car. Got Colapinto now in his 5th Grand Prix for Williams. 5th Grand Prix, right? For Williams this weekend. Lawson in his 2nd for RB, I guess 7th, if you count the 5 that he did last season too. And then the 5 rookies as well. Antonelli in 12th, O'Ward in 13th, Dragovic 18th, Schwartzman 19th, and Ollie Bear, unfortunately, out of the session. I think Albon is an average driver whose stock was way overrated past couple of years because of his poor teammates. No, because I would still say that he's performed well against other midfield drivers. Like, if you look at some of Alex Albon's performances against your Hulkenbergs, your Tsunodas, your, Lance Strolls, the other midfieldy drivers that you have over the last couple of seasons, I'd say that Alex Albon has been able to hold his own inside of the Williams car. Obviously, there was that year that he scored, 27 points to Nicholas Latifi's 1? If I remember that correctly. Was it 27 to 1? So it was that season for Alex Albon where, he absolutely trounced Nicholas Latifi. I know that you can say, well, he's had easy teammates, but he's not just been a little bit better than those teammates. He has absolutely obliterated them. He's made Latifi and Sargent look amateur. So I don't think Alex Albon's stock was particularly overrated, I would say. But yeah, I think it's the first time that he's under a bit of pressure. I think he's also had a little bit of a dip in form. Like, if you look at his general pace, I think he has just kind of slipped a little bit. Oh, yellow flag in sector 1. Somebody ripped the wall. Pato Ward, Gasly, something like that. No. Oh, it might be because they're doing practice starts. So yeah, yellow flags just come out. 27 to 1 was Logan Sargent. Was it Logan Sargent? Was it that recent? I thought it was a couple of seasons ago. Maybe it was last year. Was it last year with Logan Sargent? Wow. Okay. For some reason in my head that was 2 seasons ago. But yeah, 27 to 1 with Logan Sargent. That's what I mean, right? He's just absolutely destroyed him. Just obliterated in every single sense of the word. But Albon, yeah, does have a few races where you're like, yep, he was the best driver in the midfield, not just the best driver in a Williams. He was the best driver out of the Williamses, the Hasses, the V-Carbs, that kind of midfieldy pack. He was the best of those drivers. I feel like there's a few races you can point out. Where's Norris? Norris is stepping out of this first free practice session for Pato O'Ward, down in 13th place in the second McLaren car. Colapinto showing that maybe he's better than everyone thought against the other midfield cars. Oh, most certainly. Like, Colapinto has also just smashed it. Dragovic way too far from the limit. So Dragovic not very happy with his outing in the Aston Martin. I mean, you're never going to really be overly happy with an 18th place finish. But yeah, Colapinto is also in a little bit of a purple patch, isn't he? Colapinto absolutely flying. And therefore just looking really, really good against an Alex Albon who is having a little bit of a down part of the year. Albon is the younger Hulkenberg. That is an interesting comparison. I can kind of see what you mean though, yeah. Okay, that is the end of our free practice 1 session. To run through the order, George Russell was the fastest man out on track and the only driver to get into the 117s, even if it was by 0.02 of a second. Carlos Sainz, the second fastest man. Yuki Tsunoda, third. I think this could be a good weekend for RB. Max Verstappen, 4th fastest. Hulkenberg, 5th. Oscar Piastri in 6th place. Esteban Ocon, 7th for Alpine. Valtteri Bottas as high as 8th. Liam Lawson in his second outing for RB this season comes home 9th, ahead of Sergio Perez at his home Grand Prix. Is that an ominous sign for next season for Sergio Perez, with Liam Lawson just ahead of him by 1,000th of a second? Incredibly close between those two. Franco Colapinto came home in 11th place, again ahead of the rest of the rookies, which Antonelli was the king of the rookie drivers this weekend. He comes home in 12th for the Mercedes team. He was 9 hundredths of a second quicker than Pato O'Ward in 13th spot. Kevin Magnussen was 14th fastest. Gasly 15th. Lance Stroll 16th. Alex Albon, after his collision with Ollie Behrman, was only 17th fastest at the end of it, but only managed to take part in half of the session, and a lot of work to do for Alex Albon and that Williams team to get it back together. Felipe Drugovich, 18th fastest. Schwartzman, 19th fastest. And Ollie Behrman in 20th spot. Again, after being taken out by Alex Albon. So all done and dusted for us in free practice 1. A few bits and pieces to kind of go through, and we'll not the predictions yet. We'll get there. But a few more news stories to kind of delve into. Of course, if you are new to the channel, I've recently just launched a Patreon, which you can join completely and utterly for free. I'm going to keep telling you about it because I think the content over there is well worth subscribing to. It's completely and utterly free to sign up to the Patreon now, so you can get involved for free. And then if you want to have exclusive access to some other bits and pieces that are also on there, it is just £3 a month as the baseline tier that you can get involved with on the channel. We're trying to get to 100 Patreons, if possible, over the course of the final part of the season. We've talked about Fernando Alonso. We've just seen our rookies out on track. What other bits and pieces do you need to know coming in to this weekend's Grand Prix? Well, you need to first and foremost know about a couple of things that are happening with the Formula One drivers and rules being appealed. So Max Verstappen has already come out this weekend and said that he does think Formula One is over-regulated. And he says that it's too much of a balancing act between, taking rules away would maybe make it a little bit more dangerous. And then if there is an incident, people complain that there isn't enough rules. And then the fact that obviously when there is an incident, people complain that there is too many rules. So I do kind of agree with Max Verstappen, which I don't say very often, but I do think it is a very tightrope, or a very narrow tightrope, that Formula One, the FIA, the stewards do have to balance out when it comes to the rules, regulations, setting them, and what actually happens out on track. And Carlos Sainz also then said, from the driver's perspective, or from at least his perspective, when you're going into a corner, you're not necessarily thinking about all of the different rules and regulations. Like, you don't have the rule book inside the car with you, and your engineer isn't going to say, Carlos, go for the move, but make sure you're ahead at the apex. They're going to tell you whether or not the move is on and whether or not they think you've got the pace and the tires to be able to go for it, right? You're not literally reciting the rules as a driver inside of the car. And Carlos Sainz said, I'm always trying to be fair, or what I consider to be fair, and I hope the stewards interpret my moves in a fair manner. I try to have that approach rather than think about the guidelines when you're hitting the brake pedal, which I also agree with. I think Max Verstappen and Carlos Sainz probably spoke about it best. I know Yuki Tsunoda made some comments about having to drive like a robot, and Formula One is about that individuality that the drivers have. You want some drivers to be a little bit more aggressive. You want some drivers to be better defensively, offensively, and you want drivers to have different ups and downs in their arsenal. It makes Formula One a lot more exciting, rather than, as Yuki Tsunoda said, if the guidelines are too strict, then you end up with everybody driving exactly the same way, and you don't really get that individuality from each of the drivers, which brings a fan base, right? Lots of people are absolutely falling in love with Colapinto right now because he is quite aggressive. He's quite, out there. He's an eccentric driver, and people absolutely love that. But then people also love the other side of the coin. They love people who can put in a really solid defensive performance. It's what kind of built up Alex Albon's reputation inside the Williams team, was the fact that he put in some stunning defensive performances. I'm thinking of that first Canadian Grand Prix where he managed to pick up a good chunk of points. And he was just really, really good at defending his position. So the drivers have kind of been discussing that, and the media have kind of put towards the drivers that incident between Lando Norris and Max Verstappen, and how they felt, how the stewards kind of dealt with that situation. Obviously, I talked about it post-race. If you want to see my opinion and Dan No Skill's opinion, I talked about that at length with him in the podcast last week. So I'll point you in that direction. Still well worth a watch, even though we are moving into the next Grand Prix weekend in Mexico, because we delve into a little bit of the background of all of the drivers on the grid and going into that final 5 races, what they're going to be looking at. I think the big thing that's come up towards this weekend is McLaren have now decided to appeal the decision. So interesting that they didn't appeal it at the time, because it felt like, and they hadn't forgotten about it, don't get me wrong, like Lando Norris still came into this weekend and he said, I still don't think that it was right. I still disagree. And as a team, we still disagree. I think the majority of people who were watching disagree with the penalty that I got. So he was very much in the camp of, he doesn't feel like justice has been done, and he still disagrees with that decision. But McLaren didn't appeal it just after the Grand Prix. They didn't appeal it straight away after the Grand Prix weekend. It felt like they kind of considered it closed. They were going to complain about it, but not necessarily do anything about it. But now they seem to have changed their mind, and they claim that there's evidence that wasn't available to them at the time that the decision was made. So apparently they're saying that the stewards made a decision without a significant piece of evidence, which the McLaren team thinks they have found. And therefore the McLaren team are lodging an appeal towards the stewards. So it'd be the Austin stewards. They can't obviously go to the stewards for the Mexican Grand Prix. So they're going to go onto a video call with the Austin Grand Prix stewards that were there last weekend and discuss this further. So McLaren has confirmed that it submitted a petition to review this decision on the penalty of Lando Norris. So the decision to penalise Lando Norris with a 5-second penalty at the 2024 United States Grand Prix for leaving the track and gaining a lasting advantage, which we believe to be unfair, which was a statement from the McLaren team. We believe that there is significant and new element that was unavailable to us at the time that the decision was made. The petition for the right to review will be heard at 2:30 p.m. local time in Mexico on Friday via a video conference with representatives from both McLaren and Red Bull, and obviously the stewards and FIA, etc., present. So this isn't done. They are appealing it, and maybe in a few hours' time, Lando Norris will have a third place position reinstated for the US Grand Prix. Do I think that's going to happen? No. I do think that at the end of the day, the decision was made by the stewards at the time. I don't know what McLaren will have found. You know what I mean? Like, what kind of evidence do they now have that they didn't have at the time? Have they been going through like all of the telemetries on boards and they found the tiniest little change or tiniest little thing? Maybe, but I don't know if it's going to be a big enough piece of evidence for the stewards and the FIA to go back on a decision that was made over a week ago or nearly a week ago. You know what I mean? I don't think that they will go back on that decision, but it is being put up by the McLaren team. The McLaren team have lodged a formal appeal about what happened. And I agree with the two drivers. As I said, I agree with Max Verstappen. I do think that the rules, there's a really tight balance that they need to strike. I agree with Carlos Sainz in that the drivers shouldn't have to think about the rules and regulations whilst they're out on track. They should be able to go for moves. And really, you should only get penalized if you do something dramatic. You know what I mean? I don't think it was too big of a deal for Lando Norris. Well, I suppose in the grand scheme of things, it's costing Max Verstappen a podium. If it was another driver, you'd maybe say it's a bigger deal. Because it's Max Verstappen, he's won so many Grand Prix, he's been on the podium so many times, it's less of a deal, right? If it was Nico Hülkenberg and it was his first ever podium on the line, after so many years in Formula One, you'd maybe look at it slightly differently and from a slightly different perspective. But it feels like both drivers, even if they did swap it around and gave Lando Norris the third place, Max Verstappen the fourth place, in the grand scheme of both of those drivers' careers, not going to make much of a difference, is it? And therefore, I just can't imagine that there's a big piece of evidence that McLaren have found now that is going to change their minds. But we'll see. The appeal has gone in. And we'll hopefully get a verdict on that towards the end of the Mexico Grand Prix weekend. I do want to talk about Sergio Perez and Liam Lawson then. The title, Sergio Perez, is it going to be his last Mexican Grand Prix? In one way, I think maybe. In another way, I think there is a lifeline for Sergio Perez. So first and foremost, I think we have to talk about Liam Lawson and the stunning drive that he made in Austin. Like, obviously, he had one free practice session. Okay, yes, he managed to get, what was it, 28, 29 laps in, something like that. 28 laps, I think, more than anyone else in that first free practice session. Like, he was absolutely rattling around in that first free practice session in Austin. But considering he'd also never driven at the Circuit of Americas in Texas, I think fair enough that he needed a little bit more he needed a little bit more time to kind of run. And I was going to say his underlying pace did seem quite strong. Like, he got through the first qualifying session. Didn't get through the first qualifying session in the sprint race. He just seemed a little bit off of it, I guess. And, you know, when it came to the sprint as well, he was battling with Fernando Alonso over nothing. And it felt like maybe he'd caused himself a little bit of a headache. Like the fact that he was battling with Fernando Alonso, he angered Fernando Alonso quite substantially. And then Fernando Alonso tried to make his weekend a little bit of a misery, to be honest, but actually ended up being probably his best weekend in Formula One so far, just because of the things that he managed to do and the way that it went on for it. So obviously his Q1 lap was the fastest by an RB driver that weekend. So it was a very, very good Q1 lap. He then didn't get a Q2 lap in because obviously he had that 60 place grid penalty. So we didn't actually get to see the qualifying pace of Liam Lawson in the full qualifying. And therefore, if he would have repeated, say, that first Q1 lap in Q2, which he probably would have gone a little bit quicker, he probably would have been in the top 10. I know I'm saying probably quite a lot because we'll never know. But I do think that Liam Lawson would have got into the top 10. I do think he'd have qualified inside of the top 10 in Austin. And that would have been a statement in and of itself. Obviously, because of the grid penalty, they didn't bother. So ended up at the back of the grid anyway. But then, even though he was starting at the back of the grid, and I remember before Austin saying, well, they've done this and they've kind of taken the penalty at this point to give Liam Lawson almost a race in lieu. Like, he could go into the Austin Grand Prix weekend, he could have a semi-decent outing, and everyone would just be like, well, we don't really know what the pace was going to be because he had that 60 place penalty. So, he was starting from the back of the grid and it was always going to be really tough from there. He had that kind of excuse lined up. So even if it was a pretty poor weekend from Liam Lawson, he could just be like, look, it's my first race back. I had a 60 place penalty. There was nothing that I could really do about it. So I thought that was quite well planned by the RB team. The fact that they'd kind of planned for that engine penalty then, they kind of put in that stopgap. So even if Lawson had a terrible weekend, they could just blame it on that. But his pace was so good. He took advantage of obviously getting in front of Colapinto. He took advantage of getting past Lance Stroll at turn 11 at the hairpin. Like getting a better exit, managed to get in front of both of those drivers whilst they were squabbling, and just did really, really well throughout the Grand Prix to make up those positions and also execute the plan really well. Like, I think that most telling phase was obviously when he came out of the pits and he was ahead of Yuki Tsunoda. Yuki Tsunoda came on the radio and was furious. He was like, how on earth has this happened? How has Liam Lawson, who was starting right at the back of the pack, got the jump on me? And it was just because Liam Lawson drove a really well executed race. Like, Liam Lawson drove a really solid race, put in the lap times that he needed to, and then had the benefit of kind of running in clean air because his teammate Yuki Tsunoda was being held up by various other drivers because they were all on the medium tire strategy, where Liam Lawson got that run in clean air, was on the hard tires early, and managed to then switch onto the medium compound tire at the end, which was the optimal strategy. Obviously, we didn't know that at the time. The majority of cars started on the medium compound tire, and we thought that the two-stop strategy was going to be the better one. Turned out that one-stop strategy for like George Russell, Liam Lawson, Colapinto worked an absolute dream, and that just meant that 9th place finish, considering it was his first race of the season, considering he had a 60 place grid penalty, and considering he only had one free practice session, was just astounding. And then you look at the other side of that, and the fact that Sergio Perez was already under a huge amount of pressure. And Sergio Perez, has to deliver inside of that Red Bull. Okay, I know Max Verstappen had the new floor, but Sergio Perez didn't have the new floor. Even so, he was just so far adrift. What did he finish? Like 30 seconds behind the next best car, Sergio Perez? And I know that he started outside of the top 10, but still, it was just like nothing really went Sergio Perez's way, and had a pretty inadequate Austin Grand Prix weekend, in my opinion. Like, I know Red Bull's package was different for the two drivers, but you look where Max was again, you look where Perez was again, and you're just like, that's not good enough. And then even Yuki Tsunoda, the fact that Yuki Tsunoda, okay, arguably Yuki Tsunoda's in the most comfortable position of the entire, well, outside of Max Verstappen, of those three drivers that might swap around, Lawson, Tsunoda, Perez, you'd say Tsunoda's probably the most locked in, but he's the most locked in for an RB seat. Like, he's already confirmed for RB next year. Red Bull don't really take him that seriously as a candidate for promotion. As I said, Yuki Tsunoda is getting his first run in a Red Bull ever at the end of the season in Abu Dhabi. Whereas Liam Lawson's been in a Red Bull a few times already. You know, they clearly see Liam Lawson as a better option for the future. And they clearly rate Liam Lawson higher than they do Yuki Tsunoda, which is weird because obviously you'd say, well, why not just replace Yuki Tsunoda with Liam Lawson? But actually, Yuki Tsunoda's had a really good year, right? Yuki Tsunoda started the year really, really well and ended up doing fairly well throughout the season compared to Daniel Ricciardo. Okay, Daniel Ricciardo kind of came back at the Japanese driver for a little bit, but generally speaking, you look at the head-to-heads and Yuki Tsunoda was there on top. And I just think the fact that RB, they need to hit back at Haas. They've got Liam Lawson in the seat. If Liam Lawson can be the catalyst for RB to finish in front of Haas in the constructor standings, and maybe if Liam Lawson can pick up some more points. I know that during free practice 1, I talked about Liam Lawson possibly picking up, 12 points. If he does pick up 2 points per weekend, so far he's averaged 2 points per weekend. It's only one weekend, but he has averaged 2 points per weekend. If he does that over the last 6 races, he could get on equal points with Daniel Ricciardo for the season in just 6 races. So it's there for him, isn't it? It's so clear to see, I think, that Liam Lawson probably will be in that Red Bull seat. If not in 2025, then in 2026. And I think it could be sooner rather than later. I genuinely feel like they love Liam Lawson at RB. They love Liam Lawson at Red Bull now. And, they've ditched Daniel Ricciardo to get him in because otherwise Liam Lawson would have been talking to other teams. So the reason that they had to get Liam Lawson in now is because he would have been he would have been out of contract with Red Bull at the end of September. So they needed some sort of guarantee, some kind of proper thing that they could give Liam Lawson for the rest of the season. And Liam Lawson was like, I want a seat, otherwise I'm going to look elsewhere. They had to get rid of Daniel Ricciardo. They literally had to get rid of Daniel Ricciardo to keep Liam Lawson. And the fact that they were willing to do that, the fact they were willing to ditch Daniel Ricciardo with 6 races left to go in the season, when, realistically, Daniel Ricciardo probably deserved to just see out the end of the season, if nothing else. That's a huge, huge sign for me. The fact that Liam Lawson got that treatment. And I think Liam Lawson is now 1 foot in the door for that Red Bull seat to replace Sergio Perez. And I think if Sergio Perez doesn't have any sort of standout performances in the 5 races left this season, and Liam Lawson does similar to what he did in Austin, or even slightly below, because I think Austin was astounding. I think Liam Lawson is now that main man for Red Bull's second seat. I think he is now the front runner for that second seat at Red Bull. And I know Sergio Perez has just got an extension, etc., etc. Contracts are not worth anything at Red Bull. Like, if you've got it written on a contract, does not mean anything at Red Bull. They will get rid of you at any chance that they have. So I think this could be Liam Lawson's opportunity to jump into that Red Bull seat alongside Verstappen. Therefore, I think this could be Sergio Perez's last home Grand Prix, unless he can find himself in the final seat on the Formula One grid. Would Sergio Perez fill in that Steak Sauber role? I know that Valtteri Bottas kind of jumped to the front of the queue there. So they're looking for somebody to go in alongside Nico Hülkenberg. Liam Lawson was heavily talked about when Andreas Seidel was in charge. Now it's Binotto in charge rather than Seidel. Binotto seemed to want to edge towards a driver with a bit more experience. So Lawson kind of came out of the picture. Valtteri Bottas jumped to the front of the list. Again, though, we're looking at like their 4th, 5th, 6th driver that they actually want. They were in talks with Carlos Sainz. They were in talks with Esteban Ocon. Both of those drivers chose other teams. Ocon choosing Haas, Sainz choosing Williams. So the fact that Steak Sauber are now on their 4th, 5th choice, the fact that Liam Lawson also now seems to be a no. Valtteri Bottas was the man that jumped up there. But Sergio Perez has a similar build, I guess, to Valtteri Bottas. I know Valtteri Bottas a lot more, I guess you could say a lot more rewarded for his role at Mercedes, because Sergio Perez has just been constant negativity. Whereas Valtteri Bottas, because he was always seen as that second driver and did a good job at being Lewis Hamilton's second driver, right? won 10 races whilst he was there, you know, did enough where it was like, yeah, Valtteri Bottas is doing what we expect him to be doing. But Valtteri Bottas, this sort of opportunity for him to jump into that seat, and the negotiations seem to have slowed down a touch. It felt like it was nearly done a few weeks ago, and then it was kind of stalled once again by Binotto, and Valtteri Bottas has already come out this week and said that he's exploring all the different options that are available to him. Of course, he wants to stay in Formula One, but he's we're not going to wait forever. Still has to be, starting to contact other racing series if he still wants to be racing. There's been a little bit of news that Valtteri Bottas could go in as a reserve driver at Mercedes and be sort of a helper or a kind of coach to Kimi Antonelli in one way or another. So it'll be the experienced reserve driver in the behind the scenes and help Kimi Antonelli actually adapt to the Mercedes team and the Mercedes car. So that could be very interesting if Valtteri Bottas does get that. And that actually has come about because it's suggested that Binotto is holding Valtteri Bottas as a last reserve in terms of keeping that Formula One seat for the 2025 season, and actually is trying to recruit current Formula 2 championship leader, Gabriel Bortoleto. So it seems like Binotto has changed his mind once again. So Binotto, after coming in, cut the ties with Liam Lawson, was like, no, we're not going to wait for Liam Lawson. We're not going to do that. We're not going to offer Liam Lawson that anymore. Started moving towards the more Bottas-Perez build, but now is moving back to Formula 2 rookie. Okay, yes, he is a champion, Gabriel Bortoleto, but he's currently under contract with McLaren. So McLaren would also have to be involved in the deal one way or another. I don't think Audi would be overly happy to have a McLaren reserve as one of their drivers. I think they would want to take Bortoleto under their wing and him to become an Audi driver. I don't think they'd want to see him as a McLaren driver and maybe running, like a little bit like when we saw Alex Albon running a Red Bull helmet in a Williams. We could see the McLaren stickers on Bortoleto's helmet because he's still going to be a McLaren driver, even though he'll be at Stake Sauber. I don't think Audi will want that. And it's said that McLaren don't really want to get in Bortoleto's way if he does want to go, but at the same time, there's a lot of hurdles to jump there for the Stake Sauber team. So at the moment, it's looking like Bortoleto is going to be the number one. If Sergio Perez becomes available, I suppose Sergio Perez versus Valtteri Bottas is like the decision that they have to make. The thing I would say there is Sergio Perez brings a lot more money. But then they kind of seem to want to move away from the money anyway, because otherwise you just keep Zhou Guanyu, right? Zhou Guanyu brings a huge market with the Chinese sort of backing that he has and the money that he brings from the Chinese side of things. So I think in terms of this final seat, at the moment, Bortoleto is Stake Sauber's first choice. Second choice, I would say probably still Valtteri Bottas, unless Sergio Perez kind of has a shine in one way or another, and Sergio Perez's agent can maybe discuss that with the team. And then underneath that, maybe you're looking at, there's not a lot of people left, is there? Like Théo Pourchaire, maybe at that point, as that final seat in the Stake Sauber car. Of course, then Colapinto is being talked about, but I don't think that'll happen. I think Williams will be desperate to keep hold of Colapinto in a reserve driver role in some way or another. And then also some people talking about, well, could Colapinto replace Alex Albon or replace Carlos Sainz? I could definitely see a world where Carlos Sainz gets offered a contract elsewhere, he goes in there, or Alex Albon gets offered a contract at a big team, or Alex Albon loses a little bit of his shine whilst he's alongside Carlos Sainz. Again, the Williams team decide to pull the trigger and get Colapinto into the team, because I think he's just shown, in a way that Liam Lawson did when he came in for Daniel Ricciardo. I think Alex Albon is now in the sort of Daniel Ricciardo mold a little bit. Not, that's a bit harsh to say. I think Alex Albon is under a little bit more pressure now that Colapinto has done really well And if Carlos Sainz also does really well, and Carlos Sainz kind of puts himself as the new Williams number one, comes in, displaces Alex Albon well, does well enough to displace Alex Albon and is convincingly better than Alex Albon, then you're starting to look at Colapinto and whether he can go into that Williams seat. So I heard a few people linking Colapinto to the Stakes Sauber team. I don't think Williams will let that happen in any way. What do I think on who's going to win the World Drivers' Championship, according to me? I think it's done and dusted. Talked about the Drivers' Championship right at the beginning of the stream, actually, if you want to go all the way back to the beginning, in a bit more detail. But I do think it's done and dusted. Albon is under scrutiny. Albon finished. Not necessarily finished, but I do think the pressure is going to start to rise. I think he's had a nice time of it. He's had a good couple of years at Williams or a good few years at Williams now, where he's been clearly the number one. He's not been under any pressure from his teammate. He's been lauded by the team for a lot of his performances, and rightly so. They have been stunning performances from Alex Albon throughout the years. As I said, Alex Albon has often been the best midfield driver. He's not only beaten his teammate, but he's also beaten Hülkenberg, Stroll, Tsunoda, those other drivers that have kind of stood out at portions throughout the midfield. So I do think Alex Albon is still there. Yeah, of course. Exactly. James has said Albon has the drive, has the contract, done and dusted. I can't see Alex Albon moving to Stakes Sauber, though, to be honest. That has also been another little rumor that's kind of popped up. But I think Alex Albon will back himself to try and defend his Williams kind of number one seat against Carlos Sainz. I think it would be too easy for Alex Albon to run away from his first proper challenge, right? And then you're like, okay, you just move in teams so that you don't have to face anybody. Although Nico Hülkenberg would be a hell of a challenge for Alex Albon as well. I say that. I think Nico Hülkenberg's a slightly easier challenge than Carlos Sainz, but still a hell of a challenge. I think we're getting to the point where there's no real easy spots anymore. There's no easy seats where you can go in and clearly be a number one. A lot of the teams now, yes, they have a number one, number two dynamic, but any driver who would come in is still under a challenge, You go into Stakes Sauber next year, you've got to beat Nico Hülkenberg. You go into Haas next year, say Ollie Behrman, something happens to him, you got to beat Ocon. Ocon has proven himself to be a very capable midfield driver. You go into McLaren, you've got to beat Norris or Piastri. You go into Ferrari, you've got to beat Leclerc or Hamilton. You go into Red Bull, you've got to beat Verstappen. Like, there's no easy seats anymore where you can just go in and be the number one driver really openly and clearly. You know what I mean? I feel like there's a lot of challenges on the grid if you're going to move around. And Alex Albon, that's probably why he decided to stay at Williams, right? He wouldn't have been a clear number one anywhere else. He was maybe hoping for a little bit of an easier teammate than Carlos Sainz, is what I would say from Alex Albon's perspective. But that is where I'm going to end today's show. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for joining me for free practice one. It's been lovely, actually. I've had a little chat beforehand, a little chat afterwards. Caught you up with everything in the world of Formula One. If you have enjoyed this and you want to hear even more from me in this kind of long form podcast style, I've got a brand new podcast that is available on Patreon exclusively with guests every single weekend. Last time out, we had Dan No Skill. Little bit of a spoiler for you guys that are here right at the end of this stream. We have got CF Racing back on the channel again. An absolute favorite of mine back on the channel. So he'll be on for the live stream / post-race podcast and the mailbag as well. Plus, of course, you get Discord access and some extra perks all over on Patreon. You can sign up completely and utterly for free. Like, hit the link in the description. Just sign up to the Patreon. Become a member of it for free. See how you think. And then if you want to, you can start to contribute and help the channel move in the right direction. But I'm going to say thank you very much for watching. Leave a like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. And I'll see you tomorrow live again for the Mexican Grand Prix qualifying. Have a good one.